All right, there we go. All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about what a gaffer is, practicals and lighting, capturing good audio, some of the tips and stuff we heard from different people on like videos and websites, and what a location scout does. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and just kind of, and if anyone has any comments or questions, like always, just go ahead and feel free to interrupt me and ask. And if I don't know, I'll try to ask somebody who does and get back to you on it. So first thing is the gaffer. Does anyone know what a gaffer is before we start?
Electrical gaffer or studio gaffer?
Oh, I don't know. There's two different ones?
Yeah, an electrical gaffer will basically help out with, so for an example, if you're doing something for the golf channel, you're helping the gaffers help to run all the cables, which is also what a gaffer does in the studio. But they also dig the ditches, they hide the cables, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Okay, so we're talking about the ones that are like with the, I'm thinking electrical gaffer because they're the ones helping with the lighting department overhead of them. Would that be electrical gaffer?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking about the electrical gaffer then.
I'll be quiet for a while.
The head of lighting department, they execute.
Oh no, it was interesting. We learned something. That's awesome. Like I always try to reinstate every meeting that we're learning together, we're growing together. Each of us has maybe a little bit of knowledge. Some of us have more knowledge than the other. But the point is just to, have a little community, learn together, grow together, and learn from each other too, because there's obviously going to be stuff that some people know that we don't. And even if we're studying things and researching and looking at resources, nothing beats real experience,
Right, especially once you start getting into the nitty gritty of it all, and there's so many different things. And I know every production's kind of set up differently, so this won't be applied to every single gaffer, but the majority of the things we learned is like it applies to either the gaffer, sometimes some of the DP, the director of photography or the cinematographer, they will have some of these responsibilities depending on what set it is. And then also the key grip and the gaffer kind of mix responsibilities on certain sets. So that's something to keep in mind while we're going through all this, guys, as well. But yeah, apparently there's two. I didn't even know about that. Thank you, Nat. All right, so gaffer is the one who executes, or sometimes they even design a production's lighting plan. Usually what will happen is the director of photography will come up with a lighting plan and like how they want to go about doing it, and they will give that off to the gaffer, and the gaffer will figure out how the technicalities of how they're going to go about getting it. On paper, the cinematographer comes up with concept and design, and the gaffer executes it. But like I said, these roles can intertwine on different sets. They lead the lighting department, and they relay the lighting setup info to their crew. So once they figure it out, they tell the lighting technicians, the best boy. Well, they relay it to the best boy, and then he can relay it to the lighting technicians, or the gaffer will just relay it to everyone. About how to go about setting up that particular scene with the lights. When you're a gaffer, they have to know a lot about production lighting, how much power will be used or needed, and knowing specific lighting fixtures available on the market so that they can meet lighting. The lighting department will receive a budget, and he has to make sure they can get everything they need within that budget. And they need to know how much power will be used for each thing, because different locations have different outlets and different sources of electricity. So they need to know if they need to bring any kind of extra backup power generator or something like that to help power the lights if there's not enough power on the actual location. And just so they know if they can plug it in for safety reasons, because if you overpower a socket, it can burn out or cause a fire or mess up in some way. So they always need to be aware of how much power is going to be used and how much power the outlets will allow things to take, how much voltage it will use, pretty much. They need to know technically and artistically how to get specific quality, strengths, and shapes of light. There's a lot of different things that's coming to lighting, like we're learning this semester. And they need to know a lot of these different techniques so that anything that the director of photography wants, they can take that, run with it, and figure out how to go about getting it exactly as they need it. Some directors of photography are way more technical, so they might get very specific with what they want. like the specific lights and specific gels and bounces and diffusion in a certain distance away or at a certain angle and a certain like level in the air. And other DPs and directors of photography will just give a more conceptual description of what they want. They might say like, oh, I want moonlight. And then the gaffer will need to know how to achieve it. So it's really important for the gaffer to know all these different things, both artistically and technically, so that they can go about achieving those same concepts, whichever kind of a boss they have. The director of photography is their boss. They answer to them. So when the director of photography gives them the information, they need to know the technicals and the artistic way of going about getting that result. They meet with the director of photography to figure out the lighting and pre-production, of course. They assemble the gear list that fits the budget to successfully accomplish the lighting plan. If the location is going to be pre-lit, the gaffer will supervise the setup and the rigging of the different lighting equipment. And usually if a location is pre-lit, the gaffer will do lighting tweaks with the directors of photography's instruction once they come in and test it. So they'll like pre-light the setup, and then the director of photography will come in and work with them on tweaking it to get it exactly how they envision it to be. Outdoors, the gaffer will keep track of sun movement and try to predict when the sun will be where, and they'll relay that information to the director of photography so that they can know when to shoot, what angle, all those things, because they need to know where their light source is coming from. And when it's outdoors, that's the sun. And then they can relay that information also to the grip department so that the grip department can know if they need to bring a bunch of flags or different things to block the light at certain angles so that they can all work together to achieve the desired result. Also, gaffer may offer up creative or technical suggestions to the director of photography, and the director of photography will then decide if they want to go with it or not. So they need to be able to like take a no, and to also not be afraid to speak up with any ideas they might have. What else? Oh, they're responsible for set and personnel safety. So that's why they need to always be aware of, especially like how much voltage the lights will take and how much voltage the outlets will give. So they can be aware of those safety things, but they also need to be aware of safety things with the cabling and like people wearing gloves if they're using hot lights, things of that nature. So they need to be in charge and be able to let everyone know if they're being unsafe, and either, and handle those things appropriately to try to make sure everyone's safe on set and nobody's getting hurt or burned or, blinded by a light turning on without somebody yelling that they're gonna flashing that they're gonna turn it on, pretty much. In pre-production, the gaffer will read and break down the script for different lighting and any special lighting requirements, and then they'll get with the director of photography and talk about those things and what their vision is for it. So they'll look and see if there's any special requirements, colors, any very notable scenes that have very specific looks to them, and then they'll relay that information with the director and the director of photography all at once to try to figure out how they're going to accomplish it or what they actually want from it, because sometimes in the script isn't exactly how the director or the director of photography is going to go about getting that scene, whether it's descriptive or not. So they need to know and be aware of all those things so that they can plan accordingly. Some productions have the electric department and the grip department kind of in one. It's a G&E, grip and electric. And so then that'll make the gaffer usually be the key grip gaffer, combination of both, or they might have the gaffer and a key grip working kind of in sync or one under the other, depending on the set. And they'll be over both departments. But on the bigger sets, especially the more unionized ones, they have separate ones for grip and electric, where electric handles the lighting and the grip handles like the setups of the technical things and the different camera, what's it called? Like the dollies and those kinds of things. And then lastly, they noted that if you want to become a gaffer, it's always good to know others' jobs and their responsibilities, because there's a lot of collaboration that goes into it when you're being a gaffer. You need to work well with the grip department and be able to communicate between them. You have to communicate to your team, and you have to communicate with the director of photography and the director, depending on what they want and need.
And that has
And
pretty much been across the board what we've heard from like every part of the industry. Knowing a little bit about it really, really helps. Not just for you to understand what the other person needs, but also for you to understand. What was the example we gave, honey? I think I wrote it. I told you to write it down so
with
you wouldn't
what?
forget, and then I forgot.
With which?
So when we were talking about how it's important in any part of the industry to know a little bit about it, and
Oh,
the
they were talking
example
about
that
with
they
the
gave.
sound, I believe. No, yeah.
Oh, I remember now. It was because you can be, for example, whether you're a director or leading a production or whatever, people have different styles of doing things. So you having a basic knowledge of it at least, you'll understand that person's style and if you want to go in a different direction, because very easily you can be like, oh yeah, he'll do it the way I imagine it, or not even the way I imagine it, but like, oh, he'll do it, and I'm sure it'll turn out a certain way, and then his style is different. An example that last semester Brian was giving was when he was working as I think he was a DP on it, and his camera operator, he had he would do a lot of, I don't remember if it was close-ups or wide shots, but he would do a lot of them, and he was more the opposite style, and he kind of, I think it was too many wide shots. Yeah, he would do too many wide shots, and he wanted more close-ups, and so he had to kind of redirect him into that and show him his vision for it. And sometimes the guy would forget because he was used to productions where they would ask for a wider or whatever. So it's just, especially when we're working with indie productions and new people, it is good to know what's your style. What do you like? What do you normally like? Cinematography wise, camera wise, that sound wise, that kind of thing. And I feel like that can really help. I probably botched the explanation. Coda could have explained it better, but
I think
I
you
just,
did good. Yeah, I agree, because it's always like, you never know how everyone's going to have, especially anytime that's artistic, like lighting or sound or camera work, everyone's going to have their own like preference of how to go about doing it. And sometimes that might not line up with whoever the director is or the producer or whoever's in charge of if you're doing both. I mean, like if you're producing and directing your own thing, sometimes you'll get people that, think differently. Well, you always get people that think differently, but you'll have people that have their preference for how to go about getting something, and it might not line up exactly with what you want. So it's always good to know kind of what their role is and what the different things are. Like we were learning about sound, which we'll get into in a second, but we're learning about sound, and they were talking about this one guy was saying that he likes to record sound from far away if the camera's far away, so that it kind of lines up with how the camera's going to make it sound. And the guy was like, well, it depends on the story, and it depends on what the director really wants. Do they want it to sound like it's far away? Do they want it to sound like it's up close? So that really goes into like how, if you didn't know anything about sound and you have this guy that he likes doing it that way, then you're going to get the sound that way no matter what. And you might not even realize that's what he's doing, because he'll just say, yeah, I'm doing, it's going to sound great. And if you don't know that it is going to sound different from being up close to being far away, and you just take his word for it, it might not come out. It might come out good, but it might not come out exactly like you would want it to once you get into editing and all that. So it's always good to know a little bit of everybody's job, which is why I like learning about all these things.
Also, if you're the grip, you have to watch for boom shadows and work with those with the audio. So usually during a pre-tape, you'll as you're shooting it, as you're doing your pre-tape, you'll look for boom shadows. Sometimes instead of coming over the guys, the boom has to come underneath to eliminate shadows. So you have to work with the team.
Yeah, because otherwise that's going to cast a shadow on the background or on the other actor or something like that. So
That's
Yeah.
a really
yeah,
good note.
it's very
Thank you.
good. Thank you. Okay, so they also have to work with the sound department too, and they have to work with like pretty much everybody. So it's always good for them to kind of know and be able to look out.
Can I throw one other thing? Also, you need to know where your actors are and your camera movement's going to be, so you don't put cables down where they're going to walk.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
You
Which
know,
also goes back to the safety thing, which is another like so it's also safety for the actors and the crew, because sometimes they're gonna have a camera and they're gonna have somebody that's walking backwards while the actor's walking forward, and they need to have space and room, so you need to know where they're gonna be going, like Nat's saying, because otherwise, the person walking backwards with the camera, they could just trip on a cable and they might get hurt, which is bad. They might drop the camera while they're falling, which is
super
worse.
bad.
So, there's a few things that can happen with that, which is why it's always important to have somebody looking over these things, which is why the gaffer is there.
Hey, just saying, isn't there equipment for that? Like, don't they have like tape or something that goes over the cable, like to not have things like that? I'm not sure.
you have do you mind if I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. You have gaffer tape. A lot of times though, if you're doing a quick setup, you'll try to run the cable. Let's say the actor's here and they're walking this way and the camera's going with them. So considering that they're going this way, you want to put you run your cable up and around and back, or you just run it here, especially if you need a backlight, then you run it way around. And so like it's way out of the set. You want to give them at least 5 feet. And then the gaffer tape, like they have a picture of gaffer tapes dead center in this frame that you're looking at.
Yep.
What I would recommend is not necessarily the 3 wide, the 4-inch wide one, but you have 2-inch wide, which is the tape sitting up and down, and triple tape it. So you put one on, here's your cable, you put one strip, where am I? You put one strip here, one strip there, and then one strip on top. Usually what I'll do, if it's not a dark set, I'll have my guy put a white tape on the top, but that way no one can say it wasn't taped down. Legally, you want to make sure that it's completely taped down, and you have some site, depending upon who the actor, actress, and etc. are. You want to make sure you have insurance riders for that. On a low budget, you don't worry about it, but they're $65 a roll. They're expensive, but it's a lot better than having someone trip and fall. You can also make sure, it's also up to the camera op if they're running or they're moving, to make sure that their space is clear before they make their move.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in a studio set and even on location. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm talking.
No, yeah,
Oh,
no,
no.
definitely. I love
In
like,
this group,
is
usually
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks for the information.
we try to like say we're not teachers or anything. We're just going
Actually,
through
I
what we
am.
learned this week. And
You said you are?
Yeah, I teach video production now.
well,
that's
awesome.
awesome.
Like you can share
No,
whatever you
chime
want.
in whenever you want, because like especially if I'm getting anything wrong or leaving anything out, like I did already. So thank you.
Because the purpose of this group is just so we can like touch base, like, oh, with the resources that we found and learn together.
Okay.
I don't know if Coda explained to you, but basically it started because like COVID, he couldn't go to film school, but he really wanted to learn and make connections with other people.
Right.
So that's kind of how this started. And yeah, we have so many people that teach us a lot, and not all of them are able to come to like the live meetings, but they help us so much. So we really do appreciate any knowledge you can give us.
All right.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, honey, do you wanna, because we didn't let him introduce himself, do you wanna like talk about your background a little bit more so we can understand, or would you prefer to do it later? Or
My background is pretty
Yeah.
I'll do it. Let me see. My background is I worked at Channel 9 in Washington, D.C. as a sound tech, and then I became a cameraman there. I went freelance and opened up a video production company in D.C. and Bowie, Maryland. We did things, our clients included American Red Cross, U.S. Army, Harley Davidson, Yamaha, Ford Motor Company. We did high-end stuff. We also did the image magnification for Rolling Stones, Grateful Dead, all the Jacksons, Michael, Allen, and Janet.
Nice.
So we did a lot of stuff. I enjoy learning from other people. Been to 7 Olympics. I have 2 Emmys. I used to have a really,
Wow.
but I've been out of the business part of it, and really working the business for about 10 years.
But that's amazing. You
Enjoy it.
sound like you lived an awesome life. I mean, still living one.
Yeah,
Yes.
really
I
impressive.
hope I'm living.
Oh God. I
know,
just mean
I
like
hope so.
your life sounds pretty cool. That's what I mean.
My
Sorry.
ex-wife made out very well. So, but
Goodness, I'm sorry. I put my foot in my mouth a lot.
that's no worries. So that's a brief outline.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm super glad to have you in the group.
Yeah.
And
You-
like
if
I
you
said,
can't
feel free
come
to
to-
interrupt me anytime if I'm getting anything wrong, especially.
Cut him off. I do.
Yeah.
Keep going. I don't mean to interrupt the flow because it's really good. So
Oh no,
please.
it's fine. I like the discussion and the back and forth, and I'm learning a ton of stuff too. So like
We
this is
just
stuff
like
I'm
going
learning right
through
now,
it.
and I'm just relaying it to everyone. So the more I learn, the better for me.
Yeah,
myself,
just
too.
because we know some people work and they don't have time to go through the whole syllabus we put together.
Right.
And so we'll just like go over what we learned and go point for point and ask if anyone wants to comment or share or add anything, you know.
Cool.
But yeah, we really appreciate having you. And if you can't come to every meeting, that's fine. But we really like, it's awesome to meet you, man. Pretty much. You're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's pretty awesome to have people. We have a few people that we consider mentors that have knowledge in the industry, have worked for a while, that we go to for a little additional information. So it's always great to, you know, meet people who've been in it.
I think somewhere on your list is my email. So if anybody has any questions, I won't be able to answer them, but please feel free to ask. I just don't check my email that often.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll
So-
share your email later if that's fine.
Yeah.
I never share everyone's email because I don't know if people are okay with that, but if you're okay with that, sure.
So Gaffers and everybody else works together. And what's next on your agenda? Where do we go next?
The next thing is going to be about practicals.
Okay.
Lighting. Lastly about gaffers is they usually bring a lot of tools for setting up. One of the main things is what we just went over, the gaffer tape, different sizes, different colors for different things and different reasons. But they have a whole list of tools that they bring for different lighting setups and lighting needs, and they're the ones who put it together, the list of stuff that they need, and they usually pass that down to either the best boy electric or somebody else, and they go get that equipment so that it's there on set with those big
Goodness gracious, the
trucks
video
of
was
lighting
huge.
equipment
The
and
list.
electrical and grip trucks.
The list
depending on
was
what
so huge. We remember watching it because there are 2 in the syllabus, and I think it was the Australian man. Yeah, it was an Australian accent. I try not to. I lived in New Zealand. I should know this. But basically, he had so much stuff, and he was always talking about how he always had backups because everyone would lose everything or ask to borrow something and then not know where they put it. But it was a huge list of things, and I was like, holy crap, these people are basically like their own engineer crew and stuff. It's just insane the amount of stuff they do. It's on par with the script supervisor for me. It's just so many jobs, so many things.
So many
that they-
functions, yeah. So many things that they have to do in one.
so crazy.
Who's up in Northern Virginia? I'm sorry to interrupt.
That was
It's
Arden
Raphael.
Arden is in Virginia and Raphael's in Northern Virginia, and me and Priscilla are in a little bit middle, I guess, southern.
So me and Arden, and then Lakota and Priscilla are down south towards Richmond a bit.
Raphael, look up Skian, Mike Skian, Skeehan. Tell me you want to learn a little bit about the business and tell him that you know me. Mike Skian.
How do you spell his last name?
Mikehe. What was it?
Skeehan, Mike. He has a couple of huge trucks. Just tell him you want to volunteer and help him out. You're learning, be honest with him. He's a really great guy. His wife,
Awesome.
Andrea Rowan, who used to be a reporter on Channel 9.
Wow.
So you know.
There you
just
go,
keep
Raphael.
going.
You got a gig.
Wait, can I get the last name again? Also, like
Skeehan.
SKEE.
Skeehan.
Yep. Steam
Mike
Code.
Skeen.
Little video. He
Where
owns
can I find him on? I see a LinkedIn here.
yeah, he has a couple of satellite trucks.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Wow. But
I'm sorry. Where could I find him? I see a LinkedIn.
he's in Northern Virginia.
No, but like, how can I contact him?
You can message him through LinkedIn, can't you?
Yeah, Google, or have you Googled
Yeah.
skiing?
Yeah.
Let me see if I have it. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know I'm going to be leaving in about 20 minutes, so I want to.
No, that's fine.
Please go ahead and keep going with your thing. It's
Okay.
interesting. It is.
All right. So next thing on our list is practicals, and we'll get back to that in a minute, or like at the end, guys, to make sure we don't forget. But anyway, practicals are lights that can be seen in the frame when you are shooting something. It's visible in the shot. It could be like a fire, candles, a lamp, regular room lights at the top of on the ceiling. It could even be like a TV or different screens. And they are used to create atmosphere and make the whole scene a little bit more, add a little bit more depth into the scene. If you take out the practical lights, sometimes it makes the scene a little flat, a little boring. But when you add these different lights, especially if it's like a color contrast, kind of like in this picture right here, yellow and blue, or like the orangish, like the tungsten look, and then the blue, like those kind of match pretty well together because they're on opposite sides of the color wheel. And it just adds like an interesting look. Of course, it makes it a little more stylized. Sometimes they're just used for, regular room looks, kind of like that. But it just adds a little more depth and a little bit more to the scene than just having that blank wall or having that light turned off. They can be used to light the actual subject, but typically they're mainly just used to add something in the background or in the foreground or something like that. They're usually not used to actually light the subject. Sometimes they're used so that you can have what's called motivated lighting. And that, I don't know if I have a picture of it, but basically what that would be is if you see a candle light coming from the right, they can have an actual film light behind that. So it casts the same color light onto the subject. So it's a little brighter than it would be if it was actually just candlelight. But it will help give the, what am I trying to say? It'll help sell it. It'll make it seem like that is really where it's coming from, that it's coming from the candles when really it's coming from a different light. Because what you want in film and scripted media is you don't want to have lights come out of nowhere and somebody to be like, well, where is this light coming from? Why are they lit? It's so dark in this room and their faces are completely lit up. So people will use practicals to also insert it into the scene so that they can kind of hide a light somewhere in there and put a light behind that light, put a light behind the practical so that it seems like the light going onto the subject is coming from the candles or the lamp or whatever they have as a practical in the scene. Sometimes it is used to actually like light up the characters, and it depends on what scenes and what kind of artistic look you're going for. But something like this, I believe this is Stanley Kubrick's. I don't know which movie it is, but I believe this is a scene from that. And he used practicals in the entire scene to light it up to make those colors. I'm sure they used like some bounce cars or something to kind of give them extra light, but he really went all out on the practicals to make sure the entire scene was kind of lit up and giving this kind of artistic look to it. Shan said, I wonder with the full frame mirrorless camera with low light capabilities can use only practical lights for interior scenes in the future.
There are a lot of less dramatic examples, specifically of Stanley Kubrick, where he does use practical lighting a lot in his movies. That was just a more exaggerated example. Did you read Shan's question?
Yeah, so she was saying, can we use practical lights for interior scenes in the future? Possibly. I Me personally, I don't think it's going to look as good ever as, actual light, because you can't control it as well. You can, you can mess with it and kind of control it, but it's not going to be as controllable as like one of those film lights or an LED light that can switch back and forth between different, what is it called? Different,
Studio lights or
what was that?
so yeah, I see what you mean. Like there is like less there's less room for control for the
Yeah, they're
it is
also
less
not very,
expensive.
they don't give off enough light to make it really,
Mm,
and if you do brighten up the light, what happens is that the light gets overexposed. So it does make it a little bit harder to compensate for the whole scene, because then your actors aren't going to be as lit up as that light. And if you light it up, if you set your camera to light for the actor, the light will be overblown and it'll look like just a white thing. And if you
mm,
set the camera to expose for the light, it's going to look darker everywhere else. So usually that's why they'll have it in the scene, and then they'll have extra lights around there so that they can light the actors as well as the practicals, and then they can
I see.
expose for the practicals and light the actors so that they are lit the same exposure levels, so everything looks good. So
Some
it's
of the
not like
videos,
something's under overexposed.
So
Mm,
some of the videos gave really good examples of that because they showed like where they position the practical light and then where they position the other light that's supposed to be hidden and make it appear like all of that is the practical light. I feel like those were really good.
mm,
Last semester I sent like two videos each like meeting just to like, oh, these are some of the best ones, and I and that seemed to be very helpful. I just, since we put less videos this semester and since we named all of the videos, we thought, oh, maybe we might not want to do that because then people might just look at those and not take a look at the syllabus and miss some stuff, because there is some good stuff there too. Um, but if I find a really good one that I think explains a lot of it, I might send one or two every now and then through the.
And there are movies that have done, like I
Yeah.
believe this is actually just practical lighting. So they do it in certain situations, especially when it's like a period piece and they're doing, candlelit rooms. They sometimes just do it with candles and actually like set the
Yeah.
scene that way without any additional lights. They might use things like bounces and stuff, but I've
Yeah.
seen, behind the scenes of some movies that actually just use practicals for lighting the subject.
Mhm.
It's just,
Yeah,
it is a little harder to get right, I think.
This is Stanley Kubrick again. This from Barry Lyndon.
They said, yeah, they said he likes using practicals a
Practicals a
lot
lot.
in his films.
What
Mm.
But
might
something
happen,
like this would show like how you can get a look, and it gives a certain look that you can't get exactly with your studio lights and all of that, because it's just
Mm.
candlelight. So it does
Sorry,
give
what
a
were you
different.
saying? Yeah.
Mm.
what might happen on this one, if you look in the background, so they use your candle lights probably for your keys and your fill, but in the background they still had to fill up and give some type of lighting back there, because your candles won't throw more than 10 feet.
Right.
Well, they're able to
see.
get the faces here, but if these people back there are more than 10 feet away, they're going to drop off dramatically. So there's a pretty good chance that they threw some type of a fill light back there, just a little light. They might have used another practical. They might have put another set of candles on the floor behind these two ladies and just set them up and let them go from there.
Right.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, and that's the other problem with practicals, because they're not bright. They can be bright, but like I said, it's hard to expose for that correctly. So usually
Yeah.
they'll dim it down, and candle doesn't give off too much, so they kind of look a little weird right here, but they don't look terrible. And then and because of that, like Nat's saying, like it'll, if you just use the candles, it'd probably be pitch black in the background.
Mm.
And so you'd only see the characters. In some movies I've seen do something like that, especially like a campfire scene. I've seen some do it. But usually they tend to have some kind of light, like they use some kind of light to mimic the moon or something so that they can add some more atmosphere to it.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
Can you go back to that first one, the one you just had?
This one?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
can you make it bigger?
Yeah, I hope so.
On the lady's neck. So if you notice, she has a lot of spill from the other candles, whereas his face drops off dramatically on to camera left. So they are definitely running off of the candles there.
Nice.
You know,
You can kind of see the shadow coming from her nose from the
Correct.
candle on the camera left. Her nose on the right is having camera right is having that shadow come off of that candle right there.
Right.
Because that other candle is farther away from her.
Yeah.
So it's not giving us much of a light to her. It's more of a fill light on her, and a key light on the left candle is more of a key light on her.
And it has more candles in it, so it has a little bit of a longer throw. You know. Okay. Thanks. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Hey, you don't have to be sorry.
Yeah, but you're contributing. That's awesome.
But yeah, so usually what they'll do is something like this. They'll have actual other lights, like maybe the lamp, and maybe behind that lamp to the left where we can't see, there's another light coming in to shine on different parts of the scene so that it seems like it's coming from the lamp, but really it's coming from an actual studio light. And those are basically the reasons you'll use it. If you're using practical lights for the actual scene to light it, it can work. You just have to work within the limitations you have, and don't try to overextend. So if they're going to be moving around all over the place, practicals is pretty hard unless you're kind of doing, either something like this where I'm pretty sure there's another light in here, but all those lights are already in that building. So that'd be considered practical lights on the ceiling, just office lights. But if you're doing something like this, and if they get up and move around the whole room, those little practical lights aren't going to be able to light the whole scene. So you need to kind of work within your limitations as well of like how to get the scene. If all you have is practicals, or if that's what you want, you just need to know how to go about getting it and know what your limitations are, just like with anything else. If your equipment isn't able to handle it, just work around it. Find a creative way to get the scene or get the shot or whatever with what you have available to make it work. They also say move away from flat space. So they're adding dimension, they're adding depth in this scene. There's a lot of stuff. There's more lights in the background. There's other tables, other things like that. You got this scene has a lot of tables, and again, there's a bunch of stuff going on in the background. Again, there's a lot of stuff happening in this. Something like this, if she was against those green pillows and it was just that blank wall behind her, it wouldn't be as interesting as from the corner, because now we're seeing 3 different layers. We're seeing the behind the bed, we're seeing that mirror shine back onto her, the light back here in the corner. So there's a few different colors and a different look to it than if she was just sitting by, I guess that's a window, where it would look a little more flat. And they say to move away from flat space because it can get really boring and dull. And that's why you want to add these. That's why a lot of people add these practical lights, is to add that depth, add that interesting concept and visual interest to make the scene pop a little more and seem a little more cinematic.
And don't forget, you don't always need to have your depth of field be behind you. You could put something in the foreground. For an example, with Pesci sitting at the table, that lamp was actually in the foreground. He was in the background. So it kind of gave another depth just at that table alone. So not everything needs to be behind the subject. True.
And if you look into a lot of TV shows or movies, you'll see sometimes they're like, I'm going to use a library setting, for example. They have the books and they go through the books in the foreground while they're focusing on the subject moving behind the shelf, instead of just having everything happen behind them. Because adding that also adds depth, and it includes the movement of the camera. It expands the movement of the camera if it's outside and you have a bush near a building and you're moving and the bush is right in front of camera, so it's in the foreground and the building is in the background and you're focusing on the building. It'll exponentially show the camera movement a lot better than if you were just moving the camera without anything in the foreground. So those are some things you want to do to add depth and visual interest to the scene, so it doesn't just feel boring and dull. I have seen scenes where there's like, 7 different lamps, 8 lamps. If anyone watches a YouTube series called like Everything Wrong With, they'll sometimes pause a scene and show you how many lamps are in a room. So sometimes it can be taken overboard, I think. But it just depends on what you're trying to go for. And if you're trying to light the whole scene with practicals, you kind of have to do that. But really nobody has, all their lamps on at once. So just make sure if it's a really long scene that you're trying to keep it a little, I don't know, I would recommend keeping it on those types of scenes a little less long so that it's not as noticeable, because you don't want people to start noticing that there's, 16 different lights in the room, and it'll start to seem a little unrealistic. But if that's your stylistic choice and you want to go with it, go ahead. Just me personally, my preference would be like, if you're
And
gonna do a bunch of lights,
we are
just,
very nitpicky
be in
people.
there a few seconds and then get out.
We notice a lot. We're very nitpicky people. So
Lastly, you want to try to work, if you're using practicals and you're using them to actually light the subjects, work with ones that have the same color temperature. So, like the candles, they're both going to be giving off the same Kelvin of light. So they're both, down low in the Kelvin and giving out that orange hue. You don't want to use that as well as like a flashlight that gives off a blue hue and stuff like that, because it'll look a little weird. It might work in certain occasions, but for the most part, if you're using practicals and you're using multiples to light the scene, you want it to look similar to each other. Especially if you're using a light, you always want to match it to the practical if you're using that as your motivation for the light. So this candle on the right, if we have an actual light behind it lighting this lady, we want to make sure that it is giving off that orange tint. It's not giving off a blue tint or anything like that, because it's going to look unnatural. It's going to look weird, and it's going to not look as good as it would if you were giving off that orange hue, because it's supposed to be coming from this candle, and that candle's orange, so you need it to match. Yeah, V, it really does. It adds a lot of mood to the scene, especially in, those darker circumstances where it's like, dark and moody and broody. You got like these different low key is really good for those kinds of scenes, which would be, something like this would be a little more high key. Everything's a little more bright. And then something like that would be a little more low key, where it's like a lot of shadows and, only like a few sources of light that aren't very bright.
Can you go back to the lady carrying the tray?
Yep.
Please? If you look camera right, that's where her key light's coming from. She has a major shadow on her personal right side, camera left on the face. So you have a key light coming off of the right, her camera right, and then you can see the shadows falling off to camera left. So they're using, there's always going to be there's usually some sort of added light, no matter how soft. And don't forget, if you move a light 4 feet away from somebody, you're dropping off the percentage around 62% of brightness, luminance on their face. So moving the light in and out changes the amount of luminance on the subject matter also. So you don't always have to put spawn and diffuse it and knock it down. You can always just grab it, move it back 2 feet, and you're done. And a lot of people don't think of that.
Yeah, and it also gives off a different look. Closer you get, the bigger the light source will be compared to the subject, which means it'll give off a little bit of a softer look. And if your light isn't dimmable, then you have to figure out where to place it so that it's not over or underexposing her, unless you're going to use like a ND filter or something on your camera to try to match the look you're going for by bringing the light in closer or farther. Then also, the farther away the light is, it can also make it a little bit harder looking. So it can look a little more harsh on these shadows for her face, but you also have to brighten up the light to give it the same exposure. Like Nat was saying, it's going to drop. It's going to get a lot darker the further you move it back. So if you can brighten up your light, you can move it back and keep it at the same exposure level, but it's going to look different. It's going to make a harder light, it's going to give more shadow on the other side of her face compared to wherever that light's coming from.
Right.
So they'd have the, like you were saying, that they'd have the fill light or the fill or like a bounce coming from the left side, screen left,
Mhm.
and they'd have the key light coming from the right side. And then they probably have, it looks like they have something coming from behind her, because behind her, you
Yeah,
can
I was
see
wondering about that rim light thing.
it's, yeah, it's completely like all around her arm and her screen left part of her right side of her head. So they probably have the backlight coming from over there to the left, back here behind this girl in green or something like that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that or anything we left out about
One quick-
practicals?
One quick thing on when you guys are lighting and when I'm lighting, if you can make the room as dark as possible, if you're able to do that, now you can start to light. It's still pretty light in here, which is not good. But
Oh,
when
let me share a second. Oh, there you go.
when you have all your lights off, and of course, these cameras are really, and then you kind of add a little bit of a fill in, you know, you can give a little shadow over there, but you can add it on. When what you want to do is try to make your room as dark as possible. That's when you get to what I call paint. You're the artist, and that is your canvas. And when it's black and it's dark and there's nothing on there, that's when you guys can really start to paint and be creative.
Really start to control the light.
Yep.
And control the room, which is why you can also, like, if it wasn't nighttime, you could put like either, you know, trash bags or scrims or something over that window in the back so that it gets darker and it doesn't allow the light coming in to, you know, change the way you need to do the scene. The more you can control, the better, which is why outdoors is always a lot harder for most people, because you're dealing with the sun. It's going to be moving during the scene. It's going to maybe change the way everything looks, reset up, rechange around, you know, a bunch of different things to try to block it or diffuse it or, you know, reflect it back into your subject, things like that. So outdoor scenes are pretty hard. And that's why indoor scenes like studio places are always very controllable and have all these different lights and sources, and they're pitch black inside. If the no lights are on, it's like you can't see anything. It's for that reason.
You
All
can-
right. Does anybody else have any questions or anything or comments? All right. So next, we're just talking about capturing good audio. These are just some tips and stuff that I got while going through the syllabus and the resources we had. So they're not in any particular order, so I'll probably like be all over the place with this, but use sound effects to enhance the sound that you captured. Someone was saying that, you know, a lot of people are kind of afraid to use sound effects because they think it won't sound real or that it's kind of cheating or something like that. But, you know, if you're capturing sound on set, it's not going to sound as good as you trying to capture specific sound effects, either with Foley work in the field or, you know, in a location, or even buying those sounds online or something like that. You're not going to get it to sound as good if it's just from the scene itself, because what you should be doing when you're recording sound during a scene is pointing the mic towards the actor's mouths or their throats or their chest or somewhere around there, so that you can pick up their vocals, and you're mainly focused on dialogue during scenes and stuff like that. So if they're walking around on leaves, you might pick up a tiny bit, but you're not going to pick it up too much. And that's why it's always good to try to capture that separately, or, you know, even capturing it on set, but just as like a separate sound piece is good too. That was another tip. It's like, if you don't have enough money or don't have enough time to do Foley work and actually like try to get that as best you can always just get it on set with one of the actors, whoever's walking, to actually walk across the leaves again, but just focus on that sound during in between takes, or, you know, after the take's over or whatever. Because if you just leave it how it is, it's not going to sound as crisp. You're not going to be able to control it as well, because it's going to be part of the sound of everything else. So that's something to keep in mind.
Don't forget to try to pace your sound that you pick up after to the actor's pace. Sometimes like they'll walk slowly, and I've seen sound techs going out and getting sound and they're walking quickly, and it won't match in editing. So you try to match what their speed of their steps to the sound of their steps.
Oh yeah.
So like physically.
Yeah, and that's why it's always good. Like if you ever watch behind the scenes of a person doing Foley work, they're always watching the actual scene while they do it so that they can match it almost exactly. And so that's definitely, so even if you're capturing it on set, you need to make sure the actor is doing it the same way. Because like he's saying, if they start walking faster because they're trying to get it over with, it's not going to work because it's not going to be able to fit. So it's always good to like think of those kinds of things and try to get different variations of the sound too, just in case, and backups. But knowing what you have and what you need is always good to actually get it to match it as good as you can. And you also want to think about the boom's perspective. So this is what we were talking about earlier, like the guy he likes shooting from sound near the camera. So the boom perspective is where the boom pole is going to be. I mean, not the boom pole, but the shotgun mic and the boom operator is going to be picking that sound up from. So if you have the camera far away, they might want the sound to be captured far away too, to match that style visually. Some people want the sound to be picked up right next to the actor, no matter what, like right off screen, right off camera. Even in wide shots, they'll try to get it as close as they can. It just depends on what they're actually wanting. So that's why it's always good to know that it's going to sound, it's good to know a little bit about the stuff so that we know when we're going and filming stuff that it's going to sound different. So if you have a sound operator that wants to do it a specific way, if you don't want it to sound like it's far away, or if you do want it to sound like it's far away and he's trying to do the opposite and telling it's going to sound great, you'll be able to be like, yeah, I understand it'll sound good, but it won't sound the way I want it to. And the way the film needs it to for the story, or, however.
Maybe we should be saying it in a less douchey way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, not like me, but like, just, like it's not going to sound the way that it needs to for the story or for the vision that we have or whatever, something like that.
For what we're trying to capture right now, I'm envisioning something a little different. Maybe just say it like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different ways you need to like go about talking.
Yeah,
to the
I know.
Like, some people you'll have to be very adamant and straight up with, and some people you can be a little.
And that's why it's good to talk to. Like,
back.
I think the first semester we went over this as well, because we were like, everyone from actors to crew, they have their own style, the way that they understand things better, the way that they function better. And so it's good to know your crew and their style, and like, okay, are you more of a tell it to me straight, I need it blunt, or I won't get it kind of person? Or are you like, I don't want to say easily offended, but like just, do you prefer it a little more polite for you to feel comfortable in that environment, for you to feel, valued as well? Like, oh, this person's not being a total, I was going to say dick, a total jerk to me, because that is important too.
You can also double up on your mics. So you can let them listen, do me a favor. You can do what you want to do. Can you just throw another mic up close so that way a wireless lav, that way we have that. That's the way I like it. And why don't you just do your gig and let the editors decide when they get into editing.
Oh yeah, that was something.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, the more options you can get, the better.
Yep.
That was something we were talking about.
The more options you can have in editing, the better, so that you can work around all these different things, which is why, like he was saying, it's also good for getting like different, trying to match that sound. But if you don't know how fast they're walking, it's good to get different speeds. And then it's just like, if you can do it better in post, you can. But
one example they gave also was
the more options, the better, pretty much.
If you're doing like an Andy Sorkin type of film, or something along the styles, like Marriage Story and all that kind of stuff, where people are talking on top of each other, over each other, like real life, the ones that are a little more realistic. One thing that they recommended was, yeah, sure, do a recording of them speaking over each other, but also get another one where they're speaking one at a time, because sometimes that might be easier and then they just overlay it so that, it's not cut off or something like that. So always have backup, always record with both. That was one thing we heard a lot, like do the lavalier, but also do the boom mic if you can. Have multiple options. You never know how so many things can go wrong. It's
You guys
always
also get ambient sound, because we always get ambient sound in interviews and those types of things.
yeah,
Now,
we
editing, if there's a blank moment, and someone's breathing, you have ambient sound of just the room that the editor can dub in.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
that's smart. That's another.
cover
That's
that as
a
well.
room tone.
Right.
Room tone. You capture that like 30 seconds to a minute of it usually, and then you use that to overlay edits or to do what he's saying. And like if someone's, breathing too hard or making too much noise, or there's something in the background like a fridge going off, and there's nothing. If there's nothing else happening, and you're able to replace that audio, then you replace it with just the quiet ambient room tone. They say like also think of like we were saying earlier, like recording wild sound on site. It's kind of like fully on set. So that would be like those walking across the leaves, like we were saying, that wild sound when it's not matched to picture, when the camera's not picking it up, it's just for the sound effect. That would be called wild sound. And you can do that with a bunch of things. I think there's also a name, Walla, I think is the name for if you're capturing a group of people talking and speaking, or whatever, if they're at a dinner party and they're all clinking their dishes and talking. When you have a bunch of extras in the actual scene, they're not actually going to be talking, they're going to be miming and making it look like they're having a conversation, so that you can pick up the best audio from your principal actors. And then you'll also do a walla track or something like that to pick up the sounds of all those extras making, like, they can have actual conversations or whatever. And then you're picking up all that crowd noise. So you can use that later in post, so that you're in that same area, you're in that same location. It sounds very good. It sounds similar. They say like picking up sound on set is really good just for an extra option, because if you get, sometimes you'll go to those websites that have sound effects and things like that. Maybe they'll have a crowd noise, but it's going to sound different than it would if it was in, a cafeteria compared to a gym. It's all going to sound different. So it just depends on where you are. You always try to get the sound effects in those locations just for the extra option, even if you're not going to use it. Also, they say think about capturing wild lines where the actor gives a line a few different times in different ways. That's only if you're going to go for like more of a reaction shot. So you're not going to be focused on the actor. The actor that's speaking. If the actor's speaking on camera, then you don't want to you're not going to put in random audio that doesn't match their lip movement. But if you can cut away to something else while that actor's saying the line, they'll usually record a few different lines or different ways of doing the line, especially if they're going to go to someone else for the reaction, just so that they have the extra options, because it's always good to have a bunch of these extra options when you get to editing, because you might think something works, get to editing and realize, oh, that doesn't really sound like it flows with the rest. But the way they said it this time, now that sounds like the rest of the scene, and then you can throw that in. Like Priscilla was saying, try to get clean audio when you can, which is audio without actors overstepping each other in lines. And that'll give you more options in post as well, where you can speed it up, slow it down, or whatever else, so that you can you have more of editing availability, like editing options to do that sound. So if they are interrupting each other, of course, you want to record it that way, so you have it. But then, like Priscilla was saying, they also said to record it separately after that, so that just in case you have that extra option of editing that around that, implementing them and overlaying them so that they sound like they're interrupting each other, but really it was two separate tracks, depending on how it worked, because sometimes your audio might not pick it up the best, or someone might be quieter all of a sudden, or there's different things that can happen. So there's like basically what I'm learning in sound is just get as much as you can and get an overabundance of more, so that when you're in editing, you have all these options to be able to fall back on, So you don't have to go do all these pickups and get all the actors back and try to do like all these different sound things, which you usually have to do like ADR and stuff like that. But it's always good to try to get as much as you can so that you don't have to go back and do all these things if you can, because that'll save time and money. I mean, this is just a basic tip, but be sure to point your shotgun mic directly toward your sound source. It's a directional mic. It picks up wherever it's pointed. If it's pointed directly at your whatever you're trying to pick up the sound source of, it's going to pick it up. But if you even go off the axis a little, it's going to sound a little quieter or a little worse. So you always want to point it directly at the source to get the best audio, because you can always edit it later and make it sound a little quieter or make it sound a little off. But you want to pick up a really good sound source, so you always want to pick it up by aiming it towards wherever you're trying to pick it up.
Yeah,
So
an
that someone's
example of
speaking.
that would be just when you're shooting in RAW, or when you're shooting in a specific way, and then if you want, you can add you can layer it later, you can change the color later, but just shoot it in a way that is easy for you to mess with it if you want to later, but that you have that freedom, you're not stuck to one thing later on.
Which is why people shoot in RAW, because it takes up more data. It's, it doesn't look as good at first, but then you have all these options in editing to do colorization and all this other stuff, color correction and color grading to make it look however you want. And you have less editing options whenever you film it in the other way called LUT, like we learned last semester, which is a lookup table that already has all of these colors kind of baked in. And so that's why people will shoot RAW, so that it comes out, a little more dull, but there's a lot more dynamic range, so they can kind of tweak it however they want, and it'll still look great.
Sorry, can I ask an unrelated question?
Yeah.
Like the 10-bit versus 8-bit, in your experience, does it make a big difference, like in terms of post?
And you're talking about for cameras?
For camera, yeah.
Yeah, so it'll just give you more information, more color information to work with. So you have more availability to change it around. You can still get a great picture with an 8-bit, but the reason people will go 10-bit, 12-bit and higher is because it just gives so much more color information that it allows you to edit it and tweak, like, the reds or the blues or the greens without affecting everything. I think in our past semester, there's like videos that actually show you comparisons of, using different kinds of cameras and trying to color correct them or color grade them. The ones with less information make it harder to edit later because they don't have as much information. So once you change something, you're changing a lot more than if you had, more information. So let's, like, just for an example, if it was 100 bits of information and you're changing 10, then you're changing 10%. But if you have a higher one that has like 1,000 bits of information and you're changing 10 bits, you're only changing 1%. So it just changes a lot more of the whole picture when you have those like 8-bit compared to having 10 or 12.
How many of you
But I've
guys,
still seen people get good stuff out of them. Like you can, you have to get it on set is pretty much what it is.
who in here edits also? And what do you use?
I know Arden edits, I know Mel edits, but she's not here right now.
Okay.
Who?
Mel edits a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Arden does too, but I don't know if she's here today or not.
You guys,
Right here.
Oh, there you are.
hi Arden. One of the things I suggest, and just an idea, is they have free Premiere and free Final Cut, and just download it and just throw a camera on there and look at the controls. It will give you an idea of what you can do in the field and how you can manipulate it once you get back into edit. And agreed, it's not raw and it's not individually based, but it will give you an idea of, okay, like in Final Cut, and Arden, please correct me if I'm wrong, you can take reds and you can bring your reds up and down. Not as much as if it was raw, but if you just have a camera you're shooting, even your iPhone, you can still change some of the colors and the contrast Yeah.
So I actually know that depends on the camera. The camera will actually have the some cameras shoot it where it is shooting the 3 different colors on 3 different channels, basically. So it's like the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel,
Yeah.
and some of them have all 3 together. So it depends on the camera. If it has it separated, it's a lot easier to, like you said, it's a lot easier to like up the reds without affecting greens and blues. But if it has all 3 in one, then whatever color you change is going to change the entire look.
Okay. I haven't found that, but okay. That's cool. Yeah, but
I'll check it out and like send.
I know, like if you shoot on your iPhone, which I know is not shooting raw, I can take Final Cut and I can adjust my reds, not as much as if it was raw, but I can adjust them. I can adjust my greens and I can bring my blues up and down. So, and I can change out my contrast. Again, not as much as, you know, I can't think of the name of a camera right now, or raw, but you know, it does change some.
I mean,
Oh,
shooting
yeah.
raw is very debated. Everyone's like, oh, some people are, you absolutely need to, and other people are like, you don't necessarily need to. I'm more in the camp of like, it really depends on what you're shooting and what you're going for. I feel like what we just mean is like, try to give yourself as much freedom as you can
Okay. Yep.
with the end product, because it doesn't have to be, you don't have to shoot in raw. It doesn't limit you as much depending on what you're shooting, but just try to give yourself as much freedom as you can to play with it, to work with it, so you're not stuck on one thing, unless you're absolutely sure that's what you want. Maybe I feel like it's a very personal thing.
Oh, so you can edit reds and blues and greens on, you know, stuff that isn't raw and stuff that isn't log and stuff like that. I was just meaning that it will affect it a little more depending on how your camera captures those things.
Yes, it will.
So if the camera's capturing all 3 channels in one, you can up the reds and it won't look terrible, but it depends on how much you are trying to, you know, change the color scheme, because it'll affect the blues, the greens, and the reds if that's how your camera shoots. I don't know if iPhone puts it on 3 different channels or not,
No.
but I just know reading about that when it was all 3 channels in one, changing any of the colors will change kind of the whole thing a little bit, which you can still use and it can still look good. You just won't have as much editing freedom as you would if you had a camera that shoots 3 different channels, or with, you know, more bits of information like Shan was asking about.
I'm gonna leave you guys. I'm sorry if I slowed down the process. You guys are great though. It's interesting.
No,
we
I
really
loved having you
appreciate
and you explaining all this stuff, and it was really great having the added conversation. Definitely.
Yeah,
Thank you for the information.
Yeah.
We're here to talk with each other, so it's always great to, you know, have feedback from each other and learn together and that kind of thing. So we really appreciate it.
Nice. Raphael, give me a day or two to get in touch with Mike, if you don't mind. And I'm just going to touch base with him and say, hey, what's going on in the company? I might have somebody who might give you a call. He's interested in just interning and find out what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, he has a lot of connections. He's been around for years and years.
Awesome.
Just give me a couple days. Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Keep me
Yeah,
informed.
thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, you too. Bye now.
Raphael,
All
you got a gig.
Dude, I don't even know what to do.
Just contact the person and see what's up. All right. Anyway, so what else we got? So I think Shan, you were talking about this the other day. Just be aware of all the limitations of your sound equipment that you have, because I think I was saying this last week. The tips I got this week were also that you can capture good audio with what you have, or, you know, you can get it as best as you can, but you just need to know the limitations of the mic and how far it can reach and how good it sounds close and back and to the left and all that other stuff. So you need to know like your equipment and the limitations of it. But as long as you know it, you should be able to work around it somehow to make it sound good, or make it sound, you know, good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, so if, for example, the characters are walking in the scene, and but the walking itself is not important to the scene, and I don't have like a mic that's pointing to the foot. So in that case, it's okay to not record the footsteps clearly.
Right.
Um,
No, I was
yeah.
with the footsteps thing, I was meaning like the tip they gave is to record it after. Try to have them, make the same movements and then
Yeah.
point the mic at their feet, just so you have that option of maybe using it if you want.
Mm,
Just because you want the more options, the better. If you don't have time and it's like a really quick, like they only have 3 hours to get it done or something, and you don't feel like the footsteps matter, then that's totally fine to leave it out because it's your creative thing and it's your choice. They were just saying like if they're walking and you usually want to add sound effects to different things to just make it sound a little more, like you're in that world with them.
yeah.
But if you don't have that, if you don't have the ability to get that, or you don't have the time or whatever, then it's perfectly fine to just leave it out and focus on what you actually need. Because at the end of the day, it's your project, it's your thing. So whatever you want people to focus on, that'll be, because you can have that sound effect of the footsteps and just like you can either not even use it, or you can like bring it so quiet that it's barely noticeable, but it might add something to the scene, or you might just decide you don't need it. But having it just for the option of maybe using it is
Yeah.
what they're saying. They always want you to give more options so that if you do end up, you're editing it and you're like, I do think I need footsteps. It's better to have it already than to just be like having to go online and try to find something or find some way to get it. That's what we were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so aim your audio recordings. We'll learn more about this, decibels and everything. This is like the level of how loud the sound is, but one person said aim your audio recordings at -12 dB, which is decibels, and that'll get you the best audio. I'm not sure yet. Well, later on in the semester, I have a whole part dedicated to decibels and everything, so we'll learn more about that later. But that person said -12. You'll see it on like your monitor, like your H4n. It'll show decibel levels. Oh shoot, not that. It'll show something like this. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but definitely not right there. Anyway, there's like little numbers at the bottom, and -48 is all the way to the left. Those bars will show how loud it's getting. And then it shows like -24, -12, -6, 0. And usually when I'm using that thing, if it goes to 0, that means it's cutting off the sound and making it like have that. And you don't ever want that. So you always want the sound to be underneath that. They say to not have it over -6. But that guy said -12 will get you the best. And I guess we'll, learn more about that later, especially once we start recording our own audio for these
That guy?
assignments. What?
That guy?
Yeah, it was someone in one of the videos.
Okay.
I think it was Maddie. I don't know. But he said to do -12. And I'm just like, well, we'll see if he's right by learning more from different sources and see if everybody's saying the same thing later. Here's a tip that everyone needs to remember is have somebody, anybody, but at least have somebody monitoring the audio to make sure it's good. If you're on set and you're the only one, try to wear a headset and listen to that audio before you start. Try to do a test take to make sure you are having your audio set to the right level and that it's sounding good. You're not picking up something you don't even hear without listening to those headphones. And you might hear a bird in the background because the shotgun mic's so directional, it's pointing all the way in across the trees and you didn't even notice it because it's so far away. So then you have to readjust where your boom pole is, or your lav mic might be picking up the traffic behind the actor or character or whatever. And so then you need to go, okay, well, how can we work around this? So it's always good to monitor the sound. And if you can, have somebody dedicated to monitoring the sound at all times to make sure it's not clipping, which is going over and making that and then cutting off all the sound and no information will be there. or making it too low to where you can't even hear it because it's so low. I've had that a lot where I need to, I get in post, I'm like, crap, the sound's way too quiet. So I need to like boost it up, and then it has all this noise, this unwanted noise that you don't want because you had to boost it artificially. So having someone monitor it, make sure it's getting to that -12, -6 area to make sure it sounds the best, if that's really where it needs to go, is just a really good thing to do and have, because you don't want to get to editing and realize that your sound is way worse than you thought. They say use as much wind protection as you need. Like we were learning about the wind protection last week. Use as much as you need, but don't use more than you need. Because like we learned, it cuts off the higher frequencies. So to get good audio outside when it's windy, use as much as you need, but don't overdo it. If you can, use as little as possible. Try if you're working indoors or you're working outside in your backyard or something, and that's where the scene's going to take place, or in someone's backyard, try to turn off all unneeded appliances, like an AC unit, or like a fridge. If you can, turn those things off. Just remember to turn them back on whenever you're done, because they will have like a slight buzzing or a hum. Or if you're outside, you got the thing turned on with the fan and it's really loud. So you don't want that to happen while you're shooting. But if you can't turn those things off, you either want them to continuously go or you want them to not be there at all, because there are options in post where you can kind of try to take away a sound. So if there is a hum, you can capture that with the room tone. That's another reason they use it, is to capture that ambient noise, that hum of the fridge or whatever, and then they can try to take that sound away without affecting the rest of the audio later in post. But if you can, it's always better to just turn off all sound sources so that you can focus on whatever the scene is about. If there is an echo in the room, you want to try to eliminate all the hard surfaces. You can do this by putting up these sound. I actually have them in my room, which I'm going to actually share my screen real quick. I'll not share my screen, but my video. Those things like that, they actually eliminate sound bouncing off the walls by like hitting this thing and going across and hitting into the other ones without. That's why they're flipped, one going up, one going sideways, so that the sound hits into the other ones, and it deflects it so it doesn't have as much echo. It doesn't have as much reverb and things like that. So you want to get rid of the hard surfaces if you can. You don't have to use something like that. You can also use just like towels, blankets, anything that can kind of capture and absorb the sound, or make sure it's just not going to reflect, because if there's an echo, that means the sound is bouncing off that hard surface and coming back into the mic again. And that's what you don't want, because it's going to sound weird. It's going to sound different. If you're going to do an echo, they always say it's usually better to add it in post-production, because you can add echo effects. But to capture it, again, it's with the options. It's having multiple options, because if you capture it that way with the echo and you get into post and you realize it doesn't sound as good, or you don't actually want it anymore, you don't want it to be as echoey, or you want it to be more so, or whatever, well, now you're stuck with it. Compared to if you just got clean audio and then you add some kind of echo to it later. So either way, try to get both. If you really want the echo and you feel like you want it on set to sound exactly right, capture it, but then try to capture it without echo too, just to make sure you have both, if you have the time, of course. They said if you have no other options, you can use even like a blanket, like right over the top of the person's head, out of frame. That'll capture a lot of the sound coming and going from where they are. You kind of like box them into a blanket, so that the blanket's over their head and going off to the right and left of them and hanging down, but it's not in the frame. And that way the sound's only coming from the back and front, and it's not bouncing all around the whole room. So if there's no other option, you can do something like that. but just trying to get rid of those hard surfaces or trying to block the sound from reaching those hard surfaces is what you need to do if you're getting echo, unwanted echo. They say, check out your filming location if you can, get a sense of these sounds with either interior or exterior, so you can begin thinking of ways to block them or remove them, like turning off the fridge or, setting up sound absorbing material around the room. V said, has anyone else heard of using sleeping bags? No, but I can see why, because those are very thick and they can, they can block all the hard surfaces. So I'm sure that's been done. Really, anything that can block those hard surfaces will help. It might not help as much as, I don't know, professional material probably. It's professional material for a reason. It's set up exactly for that. But blocking it somehow is always going to help, because it's just, if you don't have anything, it's going to be a lot worse than just trying, putting a towel or, like you said, sleeping bag, blanket, something like that. Let me see what else. Like I said earlier, create a sample recording, see if the mic picks up anything you didn't hear. Always do a test beforehand. Just make sure it's make sure it's working properly too, because you might think it's working good. You're going in for the take, batteries are dead. Are you going in for the take? Something's wrong with the cable, so it's making a noise or something like that. Anything can happen. So you always want to test it out right before you take, to make sure everything's working functionally. That goes across the board. Any equipment, make sure it's working functionally before you start using it to shoot. Because the worst thing you can do is think it's good, leave it alone, and then come back to it and then start your scene and then realize, oh no, the camera's messing up or the sound is messing up or whatever. And then you have to spend extra time fixing those problems instead of already realizing there was a problem, fixing it before you even try to shoot. Recording audio separately and then syncing it is generally going to produce better quality sound than recording it straight into the camera. You can, some of the videos this week actually showed what in-camera sounds like, especially if you're just using your camera for the mic. Those are not very good. It has a lot of echo. It has a lot of, sometimes they sound like they're underwater. Sometimes it just has a lot of like static. So using a separate mic, and especially if you're using something like this H4n or another field recorder like we were learning about, it'll produce better sound, better quality. If you don't have the capability of doing that, then the next best thing is getting like a shotgun mic or a lav mic and plugging it into your camera separately if it has an XLR port, which is these things at the bottom of that. So those are on some cameras. Some cameras don't have that, but it's always better to use, the XLR input if you can, if you're trying to put the sound directly into the camera. But using an in-camera mic is the worst way to go. So just keep that in mind. Plugging a mic into the camera is different than using the in-camera mic, by the way. Cameras come with some cheaper models and stuff come with mics in them. And that's what I'm talking about. They don't sound that good. Plugging a mic in won't sound as good as plugging a mic into a field recorder, but it'll still sound a lot better because it'll be a professional mic that's made specifically to capture sound, instead of just like, oh yeah, it's an all-in-one camera that has everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say not as good as an understatement.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Yeah, most cases.
Again, if you can, get isolating headphones, like the closed back ones like we were talking about, I think that was Thursday, to hear exactly what's being recorded. You're not going to be able to hear everything if you're not using headphones. Well, if you're not using headphones, it's going to be really hard to actually hear what's happening in your audio. If you are using headphones, if they're open back and you can have sound coming in from outside, like if someone's next to you and they're talking and you can hear that, You're not going to hear everything as clearly as you would if you have the isolating ones that kind of just box you in and don't have any other noise besides what's coming from the headphones, which is so what's coming from the mic. So to hear everything clearly, you want to get those closed back headphones, isolate that sound, and just listen to what's being picked up and how it's being picked up. Another thing about the decibels thing, which I know this is a lot, but they said to keep about an 18 decibel difference between your ambient noise and your desired signal. So if I'm turning on this Zoom H4n, I plug my mic in and those bars are down at negative 46. I want to have at least 18 decibels higher than that for my actual sound so that it's sounding proper. I don't know how true this is again. Like we'll look into decibels a lot more later, but somebody just said at least 18 decibels difference because otherwise it's going to be too close together and it's going to affect the sound a lot. So separating the ambient sound from the actual source signal sound is going to make it, sound a lot better and give you more options in editing.
Wait, source signal, like the mic you're actually trying to get sound from?
The sort like the signal, the desired signal, meaning like if you're trying to pick up my voice, then my voice is the desired signal. And the ambient noise is just the noise in this room. So if I'm staying quiet, that's the ambient noise. And if I'm talking, that's your desired signal because you're trying to pick up my voice. So my voice should be at least 18 decibels different compared to that, whatever the sound is in the background, so that it stands out. It's, it's not, what's it called? It's not like, I can't think of the word, but it's not together. It's, it's separated more. So it's easier to edit things out. That's why I like the room tone. If you have the things too close together, it's going to edit and affect your voice and it's going to affect the audio overall. But if you have it separated enough, it'll have a little bit more, I believe it has more information so that it can give it, you can take out different ambient sounds that you don't want, like that air conditioning that was just going off. If I don't even know if you guys could hear it, but with a mic, you probably could.
No, we can't hear it, but thank you for the information.
Yeah, no problem. Like we were talking about on Thursday, get a good quality cable because each audio device, because they're worth the extra cost. Certain cables will have, they won't be as good to transfer the sound from one end to the other. Something could mess up, they could leak out, they could introduce new noises, like even if it's just a slight little hum, like and like it just lasts for a part of a second. It's still worse than if you get a better cable and it doesn't have that effect. So I never thought cables were important, but Priscilla told me they were, and then I learned, oh, they actually are. It's really important to get us, the more expensive they are, the more material they're used, like very specific materials to make sure that the sound doesn't.
And then I told her she was wrong and bought a crappy cable, and then it didn't work, and then I had to admit she was right.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen often, guys. I gotta, take advantage of them when they come. When he admits that he's wrong.
Lastly, keeping mics closer to the subject will produce the best results. So that person that was saying they want to be near the camera, they can pick up the sound. It might sound good, but it won't sound as good as if they were as close to the character as they can be. But sometimes you want that. You want it to sound like it's far away. But sometimes you can capture it close and then just lower the sound to make it sound like it's coming from far away. So that's why it's good to know the differences. So if you have someone that likes being next to camera always, you're like, yeah, but I don't want you picking up the noise of the camera, or I don't want you picking up any background noise of the crew. I want you being as close to the actor as possible because that's where you're going to get that best clean audio. And then they'll be like, oh, they might argue or whatever, but at least you'll know what you want. And, of course, you're not going to really know for sure until you hear the difference yourself, which is why I would recommend maybe looking up a video of close compared to far for any kind of boom mic you're looking into buying, shotgun mic. because then you can kind of see the difference of how it sounds 5 feet away, 6 feet away, 10 feet away, all that. Anyway, those are all my notes that I had from this week of capturing good audio. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Or anything you guys learned that I left out?
I guess not.
I think I did, but I literally like blanked out. I'm sorry.
If you think of it, just let me know and either put it in the chat or ask later, even if I'm on.
I was gonna. I was thinking about like, I mean, dang, there's got to be like so many ways to eliminate like that echo from like hard surfaces, but all I could really like, okay, like at like the like studio level, don't they do like those foam things or something?
Sound,
those-
yeah, they actually like soundproof the room.
Yeah.
If it's a studio, they soundproof the room, and they have like a bunch of, I don't know what it is exactly.
So
but
they
it's like
carpet the
material
floors,
in
they
between
put
walls and stuff like that.
styrofoam on the ceiling, through on the walls. They basically like, I think it's styrofoam and something else that I forgot. I remember I gave Coda an example of it. I follow a lot of tech videos, and there was this one of this studio that I follow, and I was like, oh, this is how they soundproof their studio. And there was like carpet on the floor, and I think it was what I just said, and I forgot the word. Styrofoam on the ceiling. Yeah, carpet on the floor, styrofoam on the ceiling.
I think it's more than styrofoam, but
It's
yeah,
more
like
than
there's
that,
a bunch
but
of different material they put and they kind of cram
yeah.
it together. It's like, it's very it's kind of like the inside of a pillow, some of it. It just looks like, very fluffy stuff that they shove inside and pack it in, and then they get it all tight. And then they put stuff around that, and then they might put like styrofoam around that. So it's like a bunch of different stuff they put to actually soundproof the room so that no sound is getting in or out of that space. So at a studio level, it's very, very isolated and very controlled. So you can kind of do whatever you want without the room or the acoustics affecting it, because it's just going to pick up whatever sound you actually have. And that's why, like, when you go to a theater and they're doing some kind of musician, they talk about the acoustics a lot, which is basically just like how the sound's going to react in that room, where it's going to go, and how it's going to bounce off the walls or whatever to reach the whole audience. And sometimes you'll hear people say that it has bad acoustics because, it doesn't have the right material or the right shape or however it is to make the sound bounce back the way that it should sound the best.
So that the back of the audience can hear it.
Right. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions or comments on sound? Like I said, we'll learn about decibels more later. I still am kind of unclear on that. Like, I really want to learn more about that, because that's my hardest thing. Because I know once you get too high, it starts to cut off and make it, you can't even use it. But if it's too low, like I said, the more you boost it up, it makes it sound very staticky and ugly. So I want to learn where's the best spot for my stuff. And so I'm curious about that, and we'll learn about that later, just to let you guys know. As I've tried different levels, and I don't know, it's hard to figure out. Sound is very hard, like somebody said. I think it was Raphael. Or is it Shan?
I remember multiple people saying that.
Yeah, Shan said sound is very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Definitely.
I think Shan said it too.
All right, location scouts. Anyone know what this does? This role on film set?
Basically like prospecting for like good spots to film, right? But like paying attention to a lot of like safety and like lighting.
Yes. Yep.
Details.
They're going to different locations and doing, like you said, they're just going around checking for in their day-to-day lives. They also just kind of like, if you're a professional or like a freelance location scout, you're usually just kind of looking at every single location in your city or around your place as a location that could be used for filming. And then you keep those in your head so that if you get on a production that needs something like that, you have an idea of like, hey, yeah, I saw it. You want a backdoor, soccer looking area. Yeah, I saw one down the street of this street, you know, whatever, like something like that. So they're always keeping in mind different places for locations. They actually go to the locations. If they're not coming up with it themselves, there's going to be like a location manager who kind of gives them a list of different locations to go out and, like you said, prospect, see if it's good, see if it meets the requirements of what the scene or the shoot needs and what the director or the cinematographer is wanting for the scene. They're checking to make sure it meets the basic requirements of everything. While you are shooting on set, the location scouts are going to be looking at the next locations to shoot at, trying to secure those locations. So if it's like a big, you know, like a movie or something or a TV show, they're always working to get the next place because, you know, you're always going to have an upcoming scene. So usually these locations for films and stuff, when films are shot over several months, you don't have all those locations at once. And even if you do, you still want a location scout because some of those locations could drop out at last minute. Like, nah, never mind, we don't want it or whatever. So anything like that can happen. So you always want to have a location scout, at least available to call, so that they can be like going to look for the next place if someone drops out. But usually you won't have all your locations at once, especially if it's a film with many different places. So usually you'll be shooting somewhere and they'll be looking for the next spot, securing it or whatever, something like that. If there's a shot list and a storyboard, the location scout can use that, check and see if the location matches some or all of the wanted shots, and then relay any info to the director of photography, and etc. of any shots that might not work in that location. So if they get the storyboard for the scene and they see, oh yeah, this close-up that they want is really going to work. This person with the hands right here in the field, like if they had, oh yeah, that person's head could fit right there, and that would be the exact scene that that director was looking for. But then they turn around and they're like, but you know, the rest of the location doesn't work for the rest of the scene. So if we do shoot at this location, it's only going to work in that direction. That'll be something that they relay to the director and all of them to see, like, look, that half is great. The other half has some kind of ugly barn or something, and it's not looking good. A rundown barn or, you know, whatever is over there. And so we can't use the other side, but we can use that side. So if you're good with that, we can shoot there. And then the director and all them will try to figure out if they want to do that or not. Scouts need to think about the environment and any problems. Is there an airport near there? In that field, is there going to be planes flying over there constantly? If that's so, it's going to affect sound. It's going to affect.
Yeah,
You know,
they said if you're near a airport or schools.
the airport, schools, buses, trains, anything that's going to make a lot of noise that might come around during a production, then you want to know
Ooh.
about it. Keep that in mind. And
I would say, sorry, honey.
No, go ahead.
I would say same rule applies for like, I would use the same rule as when you're trying to buy a home. You go there multiple times a day, because sometimes you go there at one time and it's super quiet and nice,
Right.
and you know, oh, this neighborhood isn't very loud. But then maybe in rush hour, or maybe there's a bunch of people that go through it at a certain time of day, that maybe there's a bar nearby that there's, or a party that a bunch of people drive to. So maybe if you can, talk to the neighbors, go there multiple times a day, see how the place, the location is throughout the day, not just at that time. Because you don't want a surprise. You don't want to get there and be like, oh yeah, this neighborhood seemed quiet. What the heck? Now it's all super noisy.
Right. That's even for like shoots. Like if you go to oh man, this house is perfect for the scene. And then you don't realize that, oh, we're shooting a night scene, and at night there's a bunch of college kids over next door having a party all the time. Oh shoot. Well, that's something I should have thought of. So you always want to also go there. If you're looking for a location, the location scout will also go there to try to look at it during whatever time the scene is set. If it's somebody's house.
That too.
What?
That's why what V just said in the comments, because you also that's why you also have to ask for permission to shoot there or to use there. There will be annoying people that are like, I don't like that. I don't like that there's a bunch of people parked, which
Oh, yeah.
I can understand, because it's like, oh, you don't know if they're gonna make a mess, if they're gonna mess up your neighborhood, if they're gonna break something. You might have kids, you don't know these strangers in your neighborhood. But yeah, so always, check with that, see if it has like an HOA or something like that, because I know now
so-
HOAs are really big in Airbnb-ing as well and stuff like that.
Wait, so you're saying like if I'm gonna shoot at a house, like a friend's house or something, that I should ask like the neighbors and like the HOA if I can like go ahead and
No,
do
no, I
that or
mean, know
something?
the neighborhood.
No, if it's a friend's house, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know how HOAs work with a friend's house. They might still not let you shoot outside or whatever, but
Oh my God, that sounds irritating.
Yeah,
though.
yeah. The HOA does
it
not
is.
like
Yeah, city
having
stuff and
cars
permits and
in
all that is very,
driveways,
very
cars in the grass. That's like one of their number one pet peeves, is having multiple cars that are not in the actual garage space. Because it clutters, and it creates a mess or whatever. And it's also scary for people who are living in a community, these strange people, all this kind of stuff. And it's also ugly for resale value. And I've been doing a lot of research in this. But yeah, so I'm saying, if you know the person and the person knows their neighborhood, if it's a contact you have, a friend, and he's like, oh yeah, I know the neighbors, I know that like they won't have an issue, and if they do, it'll be his problem because it's his house, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll talk to them or whatever, that's one thing. But if you're renting out the space temporarily, and it's either a space specific for that you're renting, or you don't really know, maybe talk to the owners, and just see the situation. And in some cases, depending on the city, you might have to talk to city council, to be able to film, depending on the area as well, because it could be like a neighborhood area.
only if it's publicly owned. If you're gonna film outside, you always have to like check with the city and the
Yeah,
well,
like
I mean, if
parks
you're
and
gonna shoot
stuff.
it legally speaking, if you're gonna shoot it, you need to
Yeah.
check with the city and the like the permit rules and all of that they have. If it's outdoors, if it's inside somebody's place, private property, the person who owns the private property gets to decide if it's if they own the yard too, you can shoot on their yard. You just can't shoot around the neighborhood technically without it being a problem, especially if there's like an HOA. But yeah, so scouts will look out for all of those things. They'll go during the time that the shoot is. If it's during night, if it's somebody's house and it's like if it's somebody's house and they're in it multiple times a day in the movie itself, then they will probably go back to that location multiple times, see what it's like at daytime, see what it looks like at nighttime, and try to see if that's gonna fit with the aesthetic and the scene of and the view and vision of the director and cinematographer.
Yeah, because they did say if you can use a location for multiple things, for multiple scenes, do that. Like if you can find a location that, what, this works for 2 different scenes or for 3 different scenes, for an indoor scene and an outdoor scene, that would save you a lot of time and money. So always have that keep that into consideration as well.
And then let's see. Location scouts, like I already said, they keep their eyes peeled every day. For their everyday travel is finding good locations for future shoots or shots. When they go to locations, they also take a lot of photos or even video of the location so that they can show that to the location manager, director, cinematographer, whoever else needs to look at it, so that they can see if it's matching with what they had in mind or if they want a different location. So usually these location scouts will be going to multiple locations for one scene. They might think that they got the house for it. If it's a house scene, I'm going back to the house again. But anyway, if they think it's a house scene and the guy, oh yeah, this one's great, they might bring it back and the director doesn't like it. So usually they'll be like looking at different houses on the same day or something and taking multiple pictures and be like, this is house 1, house 2, house 3. And then, oh yeah, I like house 2. And then, okay, we'll further that along. So they also want to take photos, like we were talking about, if they have a storyboard, they want to kind of take a photo that's similar to how the storyboard would be laid out, just to show the director, hey, look, matches what you wanted. It looks the same. Like if you look at this top picture and, the director had something like that in mind, and then you take a picture exactly like that. If you have a person in frame, or if you just have the street, you want to kind of, they want to kind of match how the storyboard looks or what the shot list is describing, so they can kind of show the director that it might be able to do exactly what they want. Let's see, that's already something I said. So they also, they'll research online before going anywhere. Before directly going anywhere, they'll research online, see where they can. Some cities and locations have like a filming directory where they tell you where you can film or where the most popular film locations are, and then they can go from there and see if they can work off that list and find a location from there, or if they want to try researching something else, or if they know they need a bar, they can just look up local bars and see pictures on Google Images and just see what looks the most like the aesthetic that the director wanted. And then they'll actually go to those spots and start scouting them directly. Good scouts try to find appropriate locations near each other, if possible, on budget and on time. So they're also looking for, something under a certain amount of money. They're going to be getting in contact with whoever owns it. First of all, if you're going to somewhere that's not yours, you're trying to get inside, you're going to need to contact the owner and ask, hey, can I scout this location? And then they give you permission to do that. You go scout it, and then you have to come up with another release form, like we learned last semester, the location release form. You have to get them to sign that with all the rules and everything they want, like don't touch my windows, or whatever rules they want are put into that contract, and whatever rules you want to make sure that the location scout will make sure that they are putting in what the production needs. If the production needs it for 3 days, they're going to make sure that that's in the contract and get that person to sign it if that location is approved. But it's going to be a few more steps before they get there, because first of all, they go scout it. Then they have all those different scouting locations. They bring it back to the director and the cinematographer and all that. They pick out their favorites, and then usually they'll go like with the director, with the cinematographer, the sound person, sound engineer, the script supervisor. A bunch of different people will actually go to it for what's called a tech scout, and that's when, like what Raphael was talking about, you'll look for all those very specific things. Everyone's going to be looking at it from a different angle. Cinematographer is going to be looking at it purely for camera and lighting, and then you might have like the gaffer going with you to look at the outlets. How much power do they give? All those kinds of things.
And the script supervisor to see if it matches the story, if it would work.
And the director to see if it matches their vision.
What if like one of those persons doesn't like it or doesn't like something about the location?
I think it ultimately goes to the director, and if not, it goes to the producer. So, if someone doesn't like it, but the director or the producer say, too bad, this is our place. We don't have the budget for the rest, or, whatever else. We don't have time to look for more, a few different reasons, or we just like it a lot, so we're going to do it anyway. I don't care what you think, sound guy. And the sound guy just has to, work with it.
Yeah, I was thinking like, what if the sound guy's like, it's too windy up here, and then
Oh, if it's something that in that level, they might have a conversation about it, how they would work around it. Yeah, the final decision is the director's, but I feel like if it's a safety issue of equipment,
that's not safety, that's just noise.
Not just noise, but we've seen like if it's way too windy, the thing can fall and break.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately though, it's still up to the producer and the director to make the decision. And if it goes wrong, if the sound's horrible, that's on the director, that's on the producer, that's on whoever said yes, even when their sound department was saying no.
Every single department has said that, both the script supervisor, the sound, everything. They've said we can give our opinion, our specialist opinion, to the director, but at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to make the final call. And sometimes you're just going to have to take a deep breath and be like, okay, you know?
Dang, no pressure, producers.
Right. That's why they have, they're so stressed out a lot because there's so many things they have to do, and they have to be the bad guy a lot of the time because they're thinking about budget. They're thinking about budget and the project. But everyone else wants, these creative decisions, which might cost more than the budget can handle. And then they have to be the ones to be like, no, sorry. Oh, you suck, producer. I mean, hopefully no one thinks that way, but, I'm sure some do. And they just have to,
And that's why it helps to understand each job function, because if you don't, you're just like, oh, this producer's just being a dick, he's just being a jerk. I need to stop saying that word. He's just being a jerk. He's just not thinking about us, our perspective. But no, if you actually understand the perspective of the producer, you can be like, you know what? I understand where he's coming from. I can see why this wouldn't work. I might disagree with it, but I can understand it's not for no reason. And so, yeah, we'll just keep going. Sorry, guys. I'm really trying to cuss less. That's on me.
I mean, I don't really call it like saying dick.
Yeah, but it's still not.
It's pretty funny.
It's still not. Yeah.
All right. So let's see. What else am I asked? So yeah, good scouts will try to find places that are close to each other. That's for budget reasons. That's for time constraints. So they're always trying to find good locations that are like, hey, look, we got this one. And also, like Priscilla said, if they can find a location that works for multiple scenes, oh my gosh, the backyard of this place works perfectly for scene number 5, and the inside kitchen scene works perfectly for that one. They'll try to find, that's even better. But if they're going there for a specific scene and it only works for that one scene, then they'll try to find locations around that area to have like a radius. So it's like, okay, everything's, within a 15-mile radius. So if we're moving in the same day, it's not going to take an hour to get there. It's going to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes, so however that works with their production schedule and budget, they always try to get it close by, as close as they can get it to each other, because that just, it's better for the whole production. Location scouts are also the ones who are going to negotiate for the use of the location.
What?
That's
Negotiate?
where they're talking about. That's where we're talking about the location release form. Whenever the director, the producer, well, all of them kind of sign off on it and say, yep, this is our place. This is where we're doing our scene. Location scout has to go back and make sure that they can, get permission from the location manager or owner to use that place. If it's outside in a city, they got to get a permit from the city. If it's private property, they have to get it from the owner, just permission, not a permit. But they're the ones who negotiate the deal, which is what I was saying, like with budget and with, how long you need that place. They'll try to get the best deal possible for them, for the production. I mean, not for them, but, and that's what gets a good one from a bad one. And that's why location scouts need people skills, and the better they are with people skills, the better they are with probably like getting to know people. And also if they have a lot of connections, they can probably make those deals pretty easily. Because if you go, oh yeah, my friend down the road, blah, 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 he'll give you a better deal than if it's just some random person that they don't know at all. They also, before they start shooting on the scene, another reason they take pictures is so that they can see what the location looked like before they started shooting, so that they can ensure that the set is going to, once everybody leaves and cleans up, that location is returned to how it was originally before they started shooting there. Locations don't want to come back and their bed is flopped over, and or their grass is completely destroyed from
better examples. You left their kitchen a mess. Their bathroom's gross.
Well, you move furniture around a lot when you're using location. So
yeah, I know, but I like the grass. What? I mean, yeah, that could happen too. But
yes, outdoors in the grass. If you have trucks, if you have grip trucks and they're driving across the grass, they can ruin it. So
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good
the
point.
location scouts are paying attention to all those things to make sure that it's left the same way it was. They won't
So
be like
basically, the location scout is kind of like your mom. Don't
no,
touch
they
that.
won't be the ones. They won't really be the
No, I'm
ones to
kidding.
make sure that you are keeping it pristine. They'll make sure that after everyone's done, it's back to the way it was.
No, I know. I
The
was just
I
trying to
believe
make
it's the line producer or the associate director or assistant director, I mean, that ensures that nobody's driving on the grass and ruining the location because that's going to come out of their budget and everything.
Yeah.
So the location scout, though, they take the pictures, and then after the location's done, they just look at the pictures, look at the place, and go, okay, everything's back to where it was. And
So they'll
it looks
just
the
kind of
same.
tidy up.
Was that?
They'll kind of just tidy up, I guess.
They just make sure that everyone else usually tidies up. They just make sure that it is the same.
They know
as
where
they
everything
left it.
is. For example, they say take pictures of everything as soon as you get there, because that way, as soon as you're done, you know where everything goes. You can
Like, let's
put
say this scene right here, like they have a bunch of equipment. They're going to make sure that, they took the pictures beforehand. So they're going to see it without all these people and this equipment in the way. And then after they're all gone, they have to clean up. But the location scout will say, we'll see if there's any trash, see if there's a lot of like smushed grass or there's like dirt from where they jammed something in. And they'll be like, hey guys, this is a problem. And I believe they relay that to the producers and stuff, and the producers tell the crew to get back there and handle it, or they hire someone to come do it or whatever. But it's not gonna really fall on the location scout. It's just for the location scout to make sure that the location is the same way it was before they started filming there. All right, they're going to check for things when they're on locations like the ease of reaching that location. This location, the picture we have up, how far away is it from the road? How, is it going to be a mile hike for the crew, or can they drive up right beside it, right away from where the camera is? Is there parking and or whatever? Is there something where they can easily access this area, or how hard is it to get there? Are they going to have to fly in through helicopter? Things like that, depending on how big your budget is and where you're going. It starts to get very expensive depending on what they need. So they always keep track of that. Like, okay, so the only way we can get up here is if we either hike for a mile or if we take a helicopter in or something like that. And then that way the production knows what they need to get there. They'll check for like nearby hospitals. Are there bathrooms nearby? What's the parking like? Like I said, where are we going to park? If we have
not
to
just
park on the grass,
hospitals, but also emergency hospitals that have emergency rooms, because not all hospitals do, apparently. So there's also that. Like, they don't always have the emergency section or whatever. Sometimes.
right.
they're
If there's any like
busy.
emergency thing on set, you need to try to get to that emergency room as quickly as possible. So yeah, not just hospitals, because like a patient first isn't going to be exactly like an emergency room. So, but it'll be considered. If you look up a list of hospitals, they might pop up. But parking, look for like, is there good parking? Is there enough space for everybody? And of course, does it look like the way the director wants? Is there cell reception out here? Are we going to be able to call each other? Or is there going to be a problem with that? If someone leaves the set, are we going to be able to reach them and be like, hey, are you getting, because sometimes they'll have runners like production assistants, or sometimes people won't be on set yet. You got to call them and be like, hey, are you coming? Are you here? Where are you at? And, get that information. But if it doesn't have good cell reception, well, that's probably not going to be an option. Power sources. Are they going to have to bring, additional generator? Or are they going to be able to generate the power from within the room by the, like we were talking about with the voltage and everything? If the gaffer gives that information to the location scout, they can know, okay, these locations have to have at least X amount of volts to be able to work. So if it doesn't, then I can just cross it out my list. And then, they do that so that they can figure out, okay, it has enough voltage, it has enough power. Or if it doesn't, hey, this location looks great, but we're going to need a generator to power it so that it works the way we want it to, because it's
That's
not
why
going to
you
be able
also
to
have
have the lights.
That's why they also need to have knowledge of the script because they need to know for which, obviously, they need to know which scene it would work for and that kind of thing.
Raphael, you have your hand raised?
Oh, just B was asking something in the chat.
Yeah, I was
If
gonna
it's guerrilla
talk about that.
filmmaking and the owner approves the location scout, are they still at fault without asking or viewing permit? So if it's a private place, private property, and the owner gives permission, make sure it's in a contract. But if it's in a contract, then it's not on the
Not
production.
guerrilla filmmaking because the owners.
Guerrilla filmmaking is illegal, but it's where you're outside in a city or a part of town and you're filming and you don't have a permit. Cities require you to have a permit if you're outdoors shooting certain places.
Especially when
Sometimes
it's
they allow, I
public
think now,
parks.
certain either public or national parks, I can't remember which, but you'd have to look that up. But depending on your area and your region, they allow you to film there.
And how
with a
much
small crew.
equipment too, because there are vloggers everywhere, and like how much you can get away with, how much you're disturbing the people there, pretty much.
If you have a huge set, if you're coming into a park and you're trying to shoot like this, they're probably going to need you to have a permit. Well, when I click on
Just to
pictures.
state, we do not
Because
condone
there's not
guerrilla
enough people,
filmmaking in any way or any
you're taking up
form.
a lot of room, you're putting up all these different flags and stuff to block. And so, obviously it's not going to be like a little thing. So then you would need a permit. And if you're trying to shoot it guerrilla style, it's usually a really small crew. Obviously I'm not condoning it because it's illegal, but
I was gonna say we
I know
do
a lot of
not
people that
condone
do
it in
it
any way.
because they don't have the budget to buy the permit, but you can get in trouble. I've heard of people getting all their equipment confiscated because they didn't have a permit and they were shooting illegally. So, that's expensive. So you just want to be aware of your risk versus
reward.
how much money you're saving kind of thing.
I'm also wondering about that because I'm trying to write scripts based on free locations I can find for my first project, and I'm thinking like some of the malls when it's like in non-busy hours, it's a good place to shoot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But then
So with
it's
the
like,
mall, it depends. I think some are privately owned, right? I just don't know. You'd have to look it up, whatever mall you're at. But I think
And there's
some of them
still a
are
mall
private.
manager as well, so you would have to speak to him
yeah.
because malls have managers, and you would have to negotiate it with him, and he would have to talk to whatever higher ups he has, and see how that would work. Pretty much.
I feel like I'm just gonna bring like some cameras, go there and take some pictures. If someone is stopping me, I'll know it's off limits.
Oh, someone should not. That taking a picture in public place usually isn't a bad thing. Like most people don't care about pictures.
Yeah.
It's just when you start filming and when you start having crews and stuff that people start getting a little antsy and like
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Now,
So if you're
with
scouting out a
some of the-
location, like I've seen people in the mall with cameras, they're taking candid photos of people and whatever. So
I see. I think for
Now-
my
now
like
with-
beginner.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. I'm just thinking for beginner projects, gonna be just like one camera on me, and then like maybe one or two actors there. So it's like very small production.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say now with all of these vloggers everywhere and YouTubers and all that kind of thing, it's a lot more common for you to see people with these small vlog cameras filming around and all that kind of stuff. So, and they don't get in trouble as much. They still do in some places, but if they're not disturbing as many people, if people don't file a complaint, and depending on what they're doing and the equipment they have, a lot of people get away with it.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of how much you have, what you're doing, and just making sure that if you do get quote unquote caught, you are not gonna like have any serious repercussions from it.
Yeah.
Which is why it's always good to check and ask, and
Hopefully you're not
Better
having
safe
any
than sorry.
reproductions from it. That's bad.
oh my, yeah,
But
my brain.
yeah, so like I know they just from what I've heard, they don't usually like take away equipment from like, if you have one camera and a sound thing. because then it's, really small. But just putting it out there that it is technically guerrilla filming if you don't have a permit and you're in a public place, depending on what public place it is.
And a private
Certain
place.
public places allow it, so you can look it up. I know some, like I said, parks. I don't know if it's like, regular everyday parks or if it's like national parks, but I know they allow filming with small crews, like, if you're doing a vlog or something like that, because they actually like the travel vlogs and stuff like that to show off the location because it brings in more traffic.
Yeah.
So they have changed some of the rules, but it's just good to know that you should always look into it and make sure that if you are going to do guerrilla filmmaking, to make sure you know what the risk is, just in case. They probably won't take away your equipment, but if you get caught, they might just tell you to leave, and then all your shooting might be for nothing because you can't get the rest of it. So it just depends on, that
And also,
kind of
none
stuff.
of it is our fault because we are winning. There's also that. I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm not taking any responsibility for anything. I'm just giving out
Nope.
the information.
It's making that very
All
clear
right,
for the YouTube
location
guys.
scouts will also, like we're talking about owners and stuff, they find out who owns the property and if they'll grant permission to film there. So if it's somewhere like just a rundown old downtown area, they need to figure out, okay, who owns this place? Is it the city? Is it, privately owned? And then get in contact with whoever they need to try to see if they can scout or, get that location, if they would allow it. And then they take notes of all of the above so they can communicate with the directors and producers. They're taking a bunch of notes on every single aspect. And they're looking out for all these different things. Location department, before any of this happens, the location department actually breaks down the script. They read through every single thing to find every location they will need to film. And then they start making that list. So depending on how big the location department is, it'll be the location manager and they'll be breaking it down, and then they'll find out we need this many locations. And depending on, who it is, depending on like how much work they're doing and how much they're delegating to other people, they might give a list of, we need a bar, we need a this, and give that to their location scout. So the location scout can look for different bars around the area. Or if they want to do more work, they might look up like, bars around the area and then go, hey, I need you to check out these 3. And then the location scout takes that and goes and checks those out from there. So it'll depend on, who's working it and how it's set up. And it'll be different every time you go in. Sometimes they don't have a location manager. So the location scout is kind of the location manager as well. So it just depends on budget and set. Already said that the locations different times of day. The location scouts are some of the first people to get hired because you need those locations. You need to make sure that you have stuff attached to it, to the project. So there's some of the first crew that you hire and then start sending out with your ideas of what to get. For a higher budget film, location scout may view several hundred locations a month for one film. So that's just to, give you an idea. Like for a higher budget, hundreds of locations are viewed in a month. That's what somebody was saying that actually works in the industry. That was one of the websites. So that just gives you like a kind of a hint of how many places they're looking at to see what works, what doesn't, and how much they need to get in contact with people, because hundreds of people own those different places. So they have to get in contact with them about, hey, can I scout this? Can I scout that? And going around scouting a bunch to find out the best locations for that film with, and that's all in a month. So it's kind of crazy. And then lastly, I forgot to add this to what they check for. They also check for is there enough room for crew? So let's say this was our scene, the picture, and all you're allowed to do, because the location, whoever owns this property says, yeah, you can be in the backyard by that fence, but you can't be in the actual place. Is there enough room for crew? Because there might be enough room for, the actual scene, the shot, but if crew can't go anywhere, then it's going to be really hard. And you might need to have, you'll have to add that to your notes to say, hey, it's going to need to be a skeleton crew, which is like as few people as possible because not very many people are going to fit in this location. So those are some things they have to go over, and then they relay that to the director. And then, like I said, they go through all the choices, figure out what they want, go check out those locations. Everyone looks at it for their own things, and then they approve the ones so that the location scout can go back to the manager, say, hey, we really like this location. We chose this one. If you'd allow us this date, this time, we'll be out of your hair after that, and works out a deal of how much. Goes back, tells the production, and production decides whether that's good in the budget, or it's like, sorry, that's too much. Usually they'll be given a value of how much they can go to before they get there, so they already have the approval. But sometimes, depending on the set and the location, you might have just like, hey, you didn't give me a budget, so I just told them this amount, and they said that they agree. What do you think? And then you get told if that's good or not. Does anybody have any questions or comments? So location scouts, you just need somebody that knows the area. Wherever you're trying to film, they need to know the area. They need to know how to get around. They have to have transportation to drive around those areas to go to these locations. And they need to have pretty good people skills to be able to communicate and make deals. Negotiations and stuff like that always take time, and it's really good to know people and how to negotiate, how to get the best deal, get people to like you. That's a really good way to get them to give you a good deal, and just be trustworthy and stuff like that. So they have to have all these different skills. They have to pay attention to a lot of things, be really detail oriented, and they need to know about camera work and lighting so that they can kind of mimic it as best they can with just one camera, so they can take those pictures that look like how the director wants it. And they just need to be budget, like aware of budgetary constraints. So aware that they can't get the most expensive thing, or they can't get they can't blow their whole location budget on one location. If they need 7 locations, they need to divvy it out and figure out how to get the most out of each. So those are some things they need to be able to do. And if you're looking into being one, that's you're going to need to be able to achieve those skills, or grow those skills and talents. And if you're trying to find somebody else that has it, just try to find somebody that knows people. If they're already established, they should already know people around the area, and they should already know locations. If they're not established and just starting out, they should just be, like I said, be good people good to be a people person, so that they can start making those connections and branching out. V said, would they also work with the people that do the staging or art if they decide to redecorate the place? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Sometimes it probably depends on the set and the production. Usually that's left up to the art department, and location is usually just used to find those locations. But I believe they usually don't do any kind of stuff like that, because that would fall under art department. But I mean, like I said, it depends. Probably differs on each set. And the lower budget productions with the less people, everyone's going to be doing kind of a bit of everything. Like the one we have coming up, everyone's going to be kind of doing a little bit more than what you would normally do on individualized job roles. So it just depends on what set you're on and what their budget is. Oh, crap. Lastly, I'm going to just show what we're going to be learning on for Thursday. Thursday, we're going to be looking into lighting equipment, which this one's kind of go under like grip and electric. So it's not just lighting is electric department, but I added some grip stuff in there, like flags and things that block light. I'm looking at this more as like an independent production view. So I'm looking more at it like they are the same department, like the grip and electric department, instead of it being separate. like on larger sets. But if you're trying to go union with it, you would have these be separate. But anyway, so some of these things are for grip. They fall under the grip department. Some of them fall into the electric department. And we'll be learning about a few things. This is the first set of things we'll be learning about for Thursday. The next one will be for next week, I believe. But it's just like things that block light, diffuse light, and that's it. But there's a bunch of different kinds. And then boom operator, what they do, what their role is, and some tips and stuff for them. That's all we're looking at for Thursday. So it's not too much, but there's a lot of things for lighting on here. Just a heads up. I think that was all I wanted to show. Yeah, okay. Oh, and then sound decibel levels will be next Monday. So that's what we were talking about today. Yeah, does anybody have any questions or anything? I'm in the recording right there.